um, concern over public security outweighs liberty. That's what it's all about. I don't think I ever told you that I wrote a allegorical novel series called Paradox. Did I ever tell you about that?
No.
And yeah, here it is. This is the first book, and it's based on a Western sheep ranch, okay? And it's called Paradox Valley of the Sheeple, and we are the sheeple, okay?
Mm-hmm.
The sheep. And the book goes through this, universal debate between security and liberty. Once some of the sheep find out they're headed for slaughter, they want to leave the ranch, so to speak. But others say, oh, that's a conspiracy theory. There's nothing to that, We're fine. The rancher is our protector, and the shepherds, are here to guide us and lead us in the right direction. But, a few sheep just don't buy into it, and they got to leave the ranch, right? And then in the second and third part of the series, trilogy, if you will, I introduce the monetary issue. Mm-hmm. I have a character by the name of Billy, who is a gold miner, okay? Grew up in northeast Georgia, where the first gold rush occurred. I don't know if you knew that. The nation's first gold rush occurred around the Dahlonega area of northeast Georgia. Anyway, he moved out to California with his buddies in the 60s, and they became gold miners. They had a big strike, right? And so he's teaching this one farmer shepherd about the monetary system in gold, okay? And that's plays out in the second and third books in the trilogy. Very
cool. Very cool.
Well, for people that don't like news, if they like to read some truth buried within fiction, that's why I wrote. But you know what, Roy, that whole thing's being played out now.
It's right in front of us.
We are having to decide between security or perceived safety, health security, and liberty, freedom, civil rights granted in the Constitution. We are living it right now. I wrote this series back in 2015 and 2016. So, I was a little ahead of the curve, maybe. I call it kind of a blend of Animal Farm and The Wizard of Oz,
Okay.
Because we got talking animals, but then I introduced the monetary issue into the series too. So
yeah, hold the book up there again. Let's get a shot of that. Just kind of hold it there. Cool. It's Paradox Valley of the Sheeple.
Right.
Author is Stuart Englert, and that's who we're speaking with today here on the Daily Coin. Is Stuart Englert. That's his smiling face. My smiling face, Rory Hall, and you got one of the other. If you got the trilogy.
I've got the trilogy right here.
Okay, cool.
It's Paradox, Valley of the Sheeple, Beyond Paradox, The Great Awakening, which I think is occurring among some of us. And then I have a Return to Paradox, which is The Circle of Life.
Cool.
And have some people that have read the series. They're encouraging me to write a fourth book.
Okay.
But I don't know what the conclusion's going to be. I don't know where. I'm kind of waiting to see where this whole thing plays out that we're involved in right now.
Well, I think that picture is. I've been saying that we are in the prequel of the Hunger Games. If you remember the Hunger Games, the first one, that was 74 years after a major revolution.
Sure.
Everything changed. And what I see is that we are in that time before that revolution, before that uprising. That's where we're at right now. Because if you think about, if you look at the landscape that made up Panem, the imaginary country, you had, different regions, and those regions just happened to look a whole lot like the FEMA regions. And it's, you had scarcity, there was resource scarcity on every level. You had food, energy, everything was scarce. And that's where we're headed to right now. Whether it's what's that?
Very well could be. We're definitely at a crossroads right now.
We are. We
We're at a
most certainly are.
fundamental crossroads. Which way do we go? Do we go toward freedom and liberty, or do we go toward, security, authoritarianism, totalitarianism?
Yeah.
And I think it comes down to every individual, does it not? We all have to decide that for ourselves. But we're influenced. We're influenced by the mass media. The repeated droning that, we've got to do what's in the best interest of all, and give up and surrender our liberties. But I think some people are saying, no, I don't want to give up my liberty. My constitutional rights trump this perceived security and safety that you're believing in. We're all going to die anyway. We're all headed to the same place. But will we all give up our freedoms for perceived security?
Yeah. Now I see freedom and liberty as they are. Freedom, I believe, comes from man's laws. That's something that's granted to us from someone else, and liberty comes from God. So, I mean, and if you remember and I just wrote this on an article this morning. I put it as an editor's note, and excuse me, saying that the quote isn't "give me freedom" or "give me death." The quote is "give me liberty" or "give me death."
Right.
And there's a reason for that, and that reason is that you, Stewart or Trump or Pelosi or any of these other fools that are out here trying to, not saying you're a fool, but these lunatics that are trying to run our life, they don't have the right to infringe on my liberty.
Right. Your God-given rights.
My God-given rights that are codified in the Bill of Rights. I mean, these are inalienable rights that we are granted from our Creator. That's exactly the wording that is used. Yes. There's a reason for that. And it's because the founding fathers understood and knew that we had to stand up for ourselves, that we had to, that we are sovereign human beings. We are sovereign just as God is sovereign.
Right.
We are made in His image. So I wrote an article about 2 years ago called when currency becomes corrupt. Then, and in that, I make the argument that when currency becomes corrupt, which is what we have right now, then everything that it touches has to become corrupt in order to hide the lie that the currency is telling. And the currency is lying. Gold will not allow that to happen.
Right.
Would you agree with that? And I mean, what are your thoughts on something of that?
Well, God created gold and silver is the way I look at it.
There you go.
Man created our currencies. And if you watched, did you watch the 60 Minutes interview last evening with Jerome Powell?
I did not.
I advise you to do it, because what he's recommending as a solution to our current economic crisis is more of the same. He wants the government to spend more, spend, to try and reinflate this debt bubble, this debt house of cards that they've built, And what will the Fed do? They'll create more money and try and, shore up the foundation of this debt pyramid they've created that was collapsing. It was collapsing on them.
Yes.
So they needed a cover, and the cover is this virus, right? To bail out the banks again, to bail out the multinational corporations, to try and shore up this corrupt system that you're talking about. It's corrupt. It's designed to fail, okay?
Right.
The whole thing is designed to fail because it's corrupt. It rusts, it corrodes on itself. And the only way they can keep building it up is continue to try and shore up this debt pyramid, put some more debt under the system to try and, keep it from being so fragile, because it is fragile. It's wanting to topple over, is it not?
Well, I don't know if you remember or not, there was a situation that happened about 3 or 4 years ago. It was a small bank in Austria blew up. Its derivatives blew up. This is a tiny little regional bank. And when it did, and what I mean by blow up, its financial, its accounting sheets went to zero. And when that happened, a bank in Germany failed immediately. I mean, and when I say immediately, I mean like the next day or within 48 hours.
Because they were interconnected?
That's correct. I said at the time, and this was when I was doing Shadow of Truth, at that time I said, that bank, that situation right there may be the spark that breaks the camel's back.
Right. Yeah, the entire banking system is interrelated, if you will. And so if one domino topples, it can take down a whole string. We saw that with the S&L crisis. I mean, we've seen it several times, and that's what they're afraid of. You know, whether it's Bear Stearns or Lehman Brothers, they know that if one big one goes down, if HSBC or JP Morgan would go down, it would take down the whole system.
Well, and that's what we're seeing right now in the derivatives, that derivatives nightmare, that casino, that unseen casino that goes on in the background, that is totally interconnected. That's counterparty risk times 10 stacked on top of 10 more. That's connected to 150 more, and it's just this pile of goo that cannot be unwound. It can't, because of the way that it's designed.
It continues to corrode. It
Correct.
continues to weaken and corrode. The taller they try and build that debt pyramid, the more it corrodes.
Yes, and I've said, like I said at the time, and I've been saying ever since, that bank, that little bank in Austria that blew up, that blew up another bank in Germany within 48 hours, that was the spark. And I think that's what we're seeing right now, is that there's some thing that's been running through the system all of this time, and it finally hit something that actually mattered back last October or last September.
Mm-hmm.
When the repo madness started, and the Federal Reserve was just shoveling cash into the system, and it wasn't doing anything. And look what happened. The impeachment failed. That thing failed, and as soon as it failed, what happened? Coronavirus exploded. Yeah. Isn't that funny? Isn't that an odd coincidence? So, but in the background, you have this absolute implosion going on, this quiet implosion of the banks, where the Fed is literally shoveling cash in, and it's going, I need more. I need more. I need more.
Right.
And it's like,
that's what Powell confirmed last night. That's what he wants more of. He needs the government to spend more to try and increase the liquidity to keep this thing from collapsing. And the Democrats in Congress, in the House, they passed a $3 trillion measure. I guess it was last Friday, right?
Yep.
So when is enough? Why not 50 trillion? Why not give every American $1 trillion? We can all be trillionaires, you know?
Might as well.
I'm being sarcastic.
No, I mean, they said that, you know, I mean, they didn't say $1 trillion, but there's people that said, why not just hand every American $10,000?
Right.
It would be less than the 3 trillion you got now. So,
and none of the establishment talk about the negative consequences or ramifications of doing that.
What do you mean there are consequences? There are no consequences. That's for losers, dude. We don't deal in consequences around here. It's all rainbows and unicorns, man. That's all we got.
Lots of unicorns.
Gold. Let's talk about gold for a minute. I was looking at, I was talking to a buddy of mine, Chris Marcus, who runs Arcadia Economics. He interviewed you a couple of weeks ago. And Stuart Englert, he wrote the book, Rigged. Hold that up. There you go. The greatest financial crime ever committed in the history of mankind. It's a great book, highly recommend it. I interviewed Stuart a few weeks ago, and then Chris Marcus has interviewed him also. And it's when I was talking to Chris yesterday, we were talking a little bit about gold, and I said that I wrote an article about a week ago, and the title of the article was, "Is $2,000 gold a future situation or an historical event?" And the reason that I asked that question is because, you know, you read all these analysts talking about $2,000 gold is coming, it's coming, it's coming, and it's like, I can't find gold anywhere for less than $2,000. I'm seeing gold everywhere at $2,000, and I found gold yesterday for the first time in about 3 weeks where it was under $2,000 an ounce, and it was like 1995 or something, 1985. So, and when I say just under 2,000, I mean skating under it. What do you think about that, Stuart, as far as you know, as well as anybody out there, maybe, and a lot better than most, that the COMEX and the LBMA, these are rigged markets. They are a disaster. They are currently a disaster. And we have what appears to be more and more every day a complete disconnect between physical price and whatever this mechanism is at these two rigged casinos. What are your thoughts on what's going on with the COMEX and LBMA right now?
Well, as you know, and as Roland Manley suggests, these systems are flawed. I mean, they're a sham.
Yes.
The market manipulators are trying to pull a three card Monte trick on us, again. And I mean, but they've been doing this a long time. They've been doing this at least since the 70s. Now, I'm no prognosticator. I don't have a crystal ball. I can't read the future. I wish I could, Rory, but I look at history. I always look back at what has happened, and I try to look at universal truths as well. And one of those is that, and you brought this up earlier, he who owns the gold or holds the gold makes the rules. And I still believe that. I believe that it is the universal money created by God, if you will, along with silver. By the way, do you know where that phrase comes from? He who holds the gold makes the rules.
I've heard it, but I can remind us of where it comes from.
It's from the 1965 Wizard of Id, like Wizard of Oz.
Yes.
Comic strip. It's from a comic strip, and in the strip, a king stands atop his castle and declares, "Remember the golden rule. We must all live by the golden rule." And a peasant down below the castle asks, "What the heck is the golden rule?" And another responds, "Whoever has the gold makes the rules." I think that monetary golden rule remains true today. Despite interventions and market manipulations of precious metals, gold still rules the monetary cosmos. All fiat currencies revolve around gold. Otherwise, central banks wouldn't hold 34,000 tons of it, or at least claim to hold that much of it.
Right.
At one time you asked me about this conversation that Henry Kissinger had with one of his undersecretaries in 1974 that confirms that gold, those who have the gold make the rules.
Yes.
And if you don't mind, I'm gonna read a little bit of that from
absolutely.
Okay.
And this is from our original conversation, and this is from the GATA archives, right?
Correct. You've got it right. There's a 1974 document, a transcript of a meeting between Secretary of State Henry Kissinger and some other staff members. And during the conversation, Kissinger asked, "Why is it against our interest to have gold in the international monetary system?" And one of his assistant undersecretaries of state for economic and business affairs, his name is Thomas Enders, answers, "It's against our interest to have gold in the system because for it to remain there, it would result in being periodically evaluated or evaluated periodically. Although we still have substantial gold holdings, about $11 billion, a larger part of the official gold in the world is concentrated in Western Europe. This gives them the dominant position in world gold reserves and the dominant means of creating currency reserves. We've been trying to get away from that into a system which we can control." Okay. Wow, that's a mouthful. That is a mouthful. You mind if I try and break that down for you a little bit?
I would love for you to.
Okay. First of all, Anders' statement is loaded with details about the significance of gold in the monetary system. First of all, he says it's not in the nation's, the United States' best interest to revalue gold periodically. Well, why would that be? Because it reveals the declining value of the dollar, okay? And notice that this conversation occurred 3 years after President Nixon took us off the international gold standard and severed the exchange of gold for dollars, okay?
But let me interrupt real quick.
Sure.
But that's when they started the futures market for the specific
Same.
purpose.
You beat me to the punch.
I'm sorry.
There's no coincidence here that
Right.
this conversation occurred the same years as gold futures or derivatives started trading on the COMEX. Okay. Okay. But let's get back to unraveling this Anders statement. Next, Anders suggested that the nation or nations with the most gold get to set and control the metal's price. Okay, right? He also implied the nation with the largest gold holdings get the privilege to issue the world's reserve currency. And that's critical right there. Okay, Nixon wanted to make sure that the United States retained the world's gold currency, the world's reserve currency, and that's why he had to decouple gold and the dollar. Okay, in this and subsequent statements, Anders suggests that gold can be used as leverage to create the largest money supply or reserves. And since gold is a monetary reserve, it also could be interpreted to mean the nation with the most physical gold can create the most paper gold. And you just said it. The year of this conversation is when the trading of the futures began on the COMEX. And that's precisely how they've been able to manipulate the precious metal prices, through derivatives trading on the COMEX.
And that's why we have a rigged gold market to this very day.
And that's why I named the book Rigged.
Exactly. Because that's exactly what's going on. Because without it, and seeing and one of the things that just for whatever reason about 3 years ago, I was watching financial TV. I had one of the financial TV stations on channels or whatever. And it's like, there's a gold box giving the price of gold, just like, the ticker across the bottom saying, Apple and Facebook and blah, blah, blah. But gold and silver during business hours have their own little box, like the Dow Jones, like the dollar, like oil. And it's like, okay, if these weren't important, then they wouldn't have a gold and silver box on every single financial network on the planet during business hours.
That's a very good observation.
It's like, okay, they would use that for Apple. They would use that for Facebook. They would use that for whatever nonsense that they're trying to prop up and whatever lie they're trying to tell. But gold and silver have their own little box.
Yes.
And they're given their own little line item throughout the day, and they keep track of it. They put the charts up there with all the movement. if they weren't important, those wouldn't be there.
Right.
Period.
And you know, the nightly news, all the nightly news programs, CBS, NBC, used to give the stock, the Dow Jones closing price, and many used to also cite the gold price. But they haven't been doing that in a couple of years. Have you noticed that? That's kind of gone away. And I think there's probably a good reason for that, because then they have to explain why that price is increasing, right?
Exactly. Or declining.
Or decline.
Because
Yes.
you know, something that Max Kaiser pointed out a number of years ago, I think he was interviewing Alistair McLeod at the time, but he said that, let me be clear about this. Gold plays a part in our global economy. You don't see it, we don't talk about it, it's not discussed, but gold plays a part, period.
Absolutely. Yes.
And what you just read from Kissinger from 1974 and all of what we've been discussing since that point confirms that.
Yes.
And now
gold,
they've just, go ahead.
Gold is a monetary backstop. When fiat paper currencies fail, gold is always there to recreate a new system or to shore it up. It's been around since the creation of the earth, and even the central bankers know that. That's why they hoard it. They both hoard it and they fear it. That's also a chapter in my book.
Now, why would they fear it?
Well, it's a competitor. It's a competitor to their currencies, as are the cryptocurrencies. I don't know if you've heard in the last couple of days, they shut down a crypto called Telegram. Have you heard about this?
No.
It's the same way. I just read about it on GATA's, the Gold Antitrust Action Committee website last night. But if there's ever a threat to these fiat currencies, they find a way to try and shut them down because they're a competitor. Did I tell you about my call to the U.S. Mint last month?
You mentioned something about that, but let's hear it.
Well, as you recall, last month, after the U.S. Mint announced it had sold out of American Silver Eagles, you remember that?
Yep.
I decided to call the Mint and ask why it can't keep up with public demand for these bullion coins, right?
As the law dictates.
Yeah, there you go. I recalled that the Mint has exhausted its inventory of gold and silver coins numerous times over the last 10 or 12 years. I keep seeing these recurring news stories, all right?
Mm-hmm.
But before I made the call, I wanted to do some research. So I got online and did this research, and I found all these old news stories indicating that the Mint had run out of gold or silver American Eagles and temporarily suspended sales at least 7 or 8 times since 2008, okay? Some years the Mint sold out of silver coins. Some years they sold out of certain denominations of gold coins. And some years they sold out of both, right? I also said, I want to go read about the establishment of the law that authorized minting of these coins. So I went back and read the 1985 laws, okay, that were signed by President Reagan, as I recall, that also authorized the gold and silver American Eagle programs, okay? And this is interesting. This is from the original law. It states that the Secretary of the Treasury shall mint and issue the coins in quantities sufficient to meet public demand. And I said, well, that's not happening. How did they get by with this? So I decided to call the Mint. And on April 13th, as demand for bullion coins was skyrocketing along with the premiums, I called the Mint to inquire and confirm how many times it had exhausted its supply of gold and silver American Eagles, okay? And temporarily suspended their sales. So no one answered immediately, but I did leave a message. And a few hours later, a woman by the name of Kelly returned my call and said someone would get back to me. on this issue. And I thanked her. And I was expecting, either an email or a call. Well, it's been over a month and no one from the Mint has answered my inquiry. I called again last week, Rory, and left another message. Okay. No one's responding to me. But I need to clarify something here. Since I read that law, I've been in contact with James Anderson over at SD Bullion. I don't know if you know him or not.
Oh yeah.
And he educated me a little. He told me that the language in those 1985 laws were amended in 2010, and the amendment of that language to meet, I should say, it leaves the interpretation of the phrase sufficient to meet public demand up to the discretion of the Treasury Secretary. Okay, and I'll read the amended language. Okay.
Okay.
The law now reads: the Secretary of the Treasury shall mint and issue the coins in qualities and quantities that the Secretary determines are sufficient to meet public demand. Well, in other words, the number of bullion coins issued now is left to the discretion of the Treasury Secretary. And the law had to be revised because the Treasury Secretary at the time, Timothy Geithner, wasn't complying with the law, right? Back in 2010. So now it's almost like the Mint is rationing coins, right? Yeah. Because if it were issuing coins to meet public demand in sufficient quantities, then surely these premiums on retail bullion coins that we're seeing wouldn't be so outrageously high, would they?
No, because the cost of acquisition would rise. So yes. You wouldn't have, $17 silver that we have here on Monday, May the 18th. You would have $25 silver with with a $2 premium or whatever.
Right. I just find it ironic that the market manipulators can create as much paper gold and silver as they want in unlimited quantities, while the U.S. government issues physical gold and silver in limited quantities. Isn't that strange? And anytime that the Mint is running out of supply, it means to me they're not minting enough bullion coins to meet public demand. And that's why these premiums are so outrageous. I mean, we're seeing premiums on an ounce of gold at $120 to $150 an ounce. And on silver, what is it? $10, $12, $15, depending on the year of the coin. I think that premiums can be almost 100% over spot price right now.
Yep. Well, see, and that was I did a video last week. I think it was, I can't remember, but it wasn't too long ago. I'll leave a link to it in the description box. But is there such thing as a premium? I keep looking at, just like I was asking a minute ago, Stuart, is $2,000 gold a future situation or an historical event? I mean, because if I walk into my local coin dealer and I say, I'm here to pick up 5 2020 Silver Eagles. So that's great. I'm glad you're here. Here they are. That'll be $125, right. Or $135, whatever it is, $25, $27 a piece. At that point right there, at that moment, when that happens, does it matter what the actual ask bid price of silver is? Does that come into play? Or does my desire to protect my wealth, or to have, for whatever reason that I'm there to pick up 5 Eagles, it doesn't come into play anymore?
The retail price is dictating the price of precious metals right now. The the spot price, the paper price is not. And my question is would these premiums or commissions or whatever you want to call them, the actual price that people are paying, would they come down if the mint issued 2 or 3 times as many bullion coins? I presume they would, but I don't know. Maybe the demand would increase and continue to drive the price up. But the actual market, the real market, I think, is the retail price. I think we're seeing that now.
I think so too. And if say I'm Samsung and I need to acquire, 5,000 ounces, or I need to, my pile of silver has gone down, I've just used, 2 1,000 ounce bars, in the last 6 months. I need to replace those. Might as well go ahead and get a couple of more while I'm at it, because the price is so cheap. I mean, where is that? How does that play into it? If I'm Samsung or Apple or some other electronics firm, and I'm looking at $17 an ounce silver, why in the world wouldn't I load up on 3 5,000 ounce contracts? Why wouldn't I do that? I mean, or just go out and buy a freaking mine, which is what I said years ago. I mean, back in 2011, when everything was going completely nuts, 2011, 2012, right. And then all the way through about 2015, when silver was it was crazy. And why wouldn't they buy a mine? Why wouldn't Apple and Samsung and these other electronic giants, why wouldn't they buy First Majestic? Why wouldn't they buy that? Why wouldn't that make sense to their bottom line?
I don't have an answer to your question. I see what you're saying, and it would seem logical as a business person that they would protect their financial interest by sourcing the cheapest metal they could find.
Right.
And building it into their business model.
That's the only thing that would make sense to me. And I don't, and I never will understand it, but that's, they're the ones that are doing it, not me. But I'm sorry, something got caught in my throat, and it's it's irritating me. So I apologize for that. I don't understand. I mean, why wouldn't, if that were to happen, if Samsung and Apple and these other electronic giants, if they were to knock on the door, and it may be what we're seeing with these breaks in the exchange for physical dynamic, but that's more in gold. We're definitely seeing gold. Yeah. But I think that there's the potential to see it in the silver, on the silver side as well, because there's still a cost associated with getting silver out of the ground. There's still a cost with transportation and storage and all of those other aspects of it. And then the refining, the reconfiguration, if you will, whether it's going into solar panels or clothing or medicine, whatever use it's going into, you've got all of those costs that go into it as well. I mean, my point is that it does, $17 an ounce silver doesn't even make sense.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. Well, based on, Roland Manley's research, and he focuses more on gold, there's something tragically amiss among the precious metals markets. There's no doubt about it. But whether you call it fuzzy math or fraudulent accounting, I mean, what's going on just doesn't make sense. The divergence between the spot price and the futures price and the retail price just tells you that something is amiss. And Ronan suggests that, the bullion bankers have some nervousness and consternation right now about that and their ability to deliver. And I mean, otherwise, why would the COMEX have to fly in 400 ounce bars from London or gold stock from the Perth Mint in Australia, or I think you posted a story yesterday about Russian gold being shipped to London. And what about that photograph with those bars laying on the ground? I mean, that just seems bizarre in itself.
I asked the question, is this Russia sending a signal to the rest of the world to say, because that story was so underreported. That situation happened on March the 26th, where two guys, supposedly two baggage handlers, picked up a suitcase that had two bars of gold in it off the tarmac somewhere. And it's like, it's 25 kilos of gold total. It's like
$750,000.
How does that even make?
Out on the tarmac?
How does that happen? That does not happen.
Well,
it does not happen.
It almost looks like disinformation to me,
Well, or somebody saying, hey, look at this.
Oh, definitely.
You want an explanation for your exchange for physical and where the gold's coming from and what's happening? Here you go.
But the story just doesn't seem real to me, Rory. It just doesn't seem real that you'd have two airport employees finding these huge gold bars sitting on the tarmac. That doesn't make sense.
And then they turn them in.
Yeah. What? These two things don't go together, right?
Well, no. Once again, I think that it's Russia's way of saying, hey, we're supplying the gold. They're telling you one thing, but we're telling you, we're showing you the reality of the situation. That I think that's what's going on. And maybe,
well, when oil prices tanked, Russia announced that they weren't going to buy any more domestic stocks of gold. So maybe they found a foreign market for their gold,
Well, I mean, whoever there's plenty of people that would take it, that would take their gold.
Oh, absolutely.
They signed an agreement with China back in 2015, 2016, somewhere in that time frame, where they were going to sell, and this never made any sense to me whatsoever, was that they were going to sell between 80 and 100 tons of Russian gold to China on an annual basis going forward. And it's not reported.
Right.
I'm not sure where the gold is coming from, because it hasn't impacted how much gold that Russia has acquired at the central bank level. And it hasn't impacted how much gold that is reported coming from their mines. So I'm not sure how that's been working or what's happening. But I mean, there was an agreement, Louis Camerasano is the one that uncovered the story a few years ago. And we did a couple of videos about it, back in the day. He's over at Small Gold. And it was like these gold bars laying on the tarmac. It was just this weird situation that was so underreported and no one looked at it, but the implications of it are just gargantuan. I mean, they're huge. I mean, you don't have two baggage handlers walk out on the tarmac and say, hey man, look what I found. I got a big gold bar here. That don't happen. Not without there being something to it. Not without there being a whole lot more to that story.
There's a lot more to that story than that photo shows. That's for sure.
And when all of the refineries were being reported as being shut down, and I can't pronounce it, but the refinery in Siberia, they weren't mentioned. This is the largest gold refinery in Russia, and they're refining all of the gold in Russia, and they already have an agreement with the LBMA. So some of the gold that they were shipping to London is supposed to be going there theoretically, So, but the whole thing is just weird. But that there was no mention of that refinery being shut down.
Gotcha.
Okay, so that's a big deal.
Yeah.
That's a
I
very
mean,
big deal.
your story is the first that I'd heard about that. So that's news to me, and I agree with you. It's not been reported, or it's been underreported. But there's something there. I don't know what to make of it. I
I
really
don't
don't.
either. It's very odd. That's what I can say with confidence. That it's an odd situation, and the fact that there's this massive refinery that's involved with it, and you know, there's just, and it was at the time I was trying to look at the timeline on it. Also, you had March 26th is when the gold bars were found. You had somewhere around that date, and April 11th is when HSBC uh, lost all of their, it was like the 29th of March 29th. It was like
200
2 days
million,
later,
200
$200
million
million in one
in a
day. And
day.
that was, and you know, and then that same window, within about a week's time, Scotia steps out of the price rigging. I'm sorry, the pricing mechanism of
Right.
COMEX,
The London fix.
or the London fix, and it's like, okay, all of these things are. This is just too weird, and
Yeah.
the timing is you know, you got the EFP that's blowing up
Right.
because they can't find any gold, and there's people standing at the window going, "Hey, here's my contract, fill it." Okay, call me tomorrow. You know, and it's, I don't know, the timing of all these things is just.
There are a lot of peculiar things going on in the precious metals market right now.
I'm not saying that anybody's a criminal, but you know, if it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, probably a duck.
There's some ducks around.
Exactly. Oh, well, Stuart, I could carry on this conversation the rest of the day, because it is an absolute delight speaking with you.
Thank
And
you.
we've been speaking with Stuart Englert. He is the author of Rigged. Give us the rest of the name.
Rigged, exposing the largest financial fraud in history.
There you go. Got to get a copy of that. You also wrote the other 3 books, Paradox. Really appreciate all your time. I'll put a link to all the books in the description box below.
I
And
appreciate
Stuart,
that.
is there a way we can follow your work or find out more about what you got going on?
Well, all my books are available on Amazon right now, and you can find them by looking up my name, Stuart, Stuart, last name Englert, Englert. I've had some people request signed copies of my book, and they can do that by emailing me at srenglert, Englert, at comcast.net. I have had some people overseas asking for signed copies, and I found out it's too costly prohibitive to ship them overseas with the FX exchange fees, you know, foreign exchange fees, and the postal rates. So I can only ship books in the United States. So I'll just share that with you. But
yeah, and I'll make sure that that your email address and all of that is in the description box, so that if people want to get a signed copy, then they can do that. They can reach out, ask you questions if they'd like. And Stuart, once again, I really appreciate all your time, your incredible knowledge of what's going on out there, and the work that you do is really, it's really important to what we have going on in our world, and I'm just so appreciative of what you do, and I'm grateful for your time today. So
thanks so much, Roy. Thanks for the invitation, and keep up the good work yourself.
thank you, and we'll pick up again in the not too distant future.
Sounds good.